All right, we are live. Thank you everyone so much for joining us today. We have a special guest today, Hegel Laurent of Laurent Law Office. I wanted to just first give a shout out to all the Miami business leaders. We're streaming this live. If you are a CEO, if you own real estate, you have a home where you may have an efficiency, you may have a multifamily, a commercial building, a retail building. This is the video that we want to be able to watch today because we have a special guest, Hegel Laurent from Laurent Law Office. Hegel, how long have I known you for?
I think since about 2011, 2012, right around there.
Wow, yeah. So we've known each other for a long time. I've used Hegel for contracts for Arch Solvers, the business. I've referred them to friends and family, and you've always taken good care of us. So, for those of you that don't know who you are, about your law firm, the law you practice, go ahead and give a brief intro on that.
Okay, well, I'm Attorney Hegel Laurent. I've been practicing for about 9 years now. My office is in Plantation, and I work primarily in the South Florida area. I'm from Miami. I handle primarily landlord-tenant disputes on both sides. As of lately, I've been doing a lot more work for landlords, but I still do represent tenants just as well. And I've also been now also in commercial, in addition to already doing residential. I also do appeals of different matters. And I've also, been involved in probate matters as well. And now with respect to landlord and tenant, that's probably where most of my work relies on. And I do handle a number of eviction matters. And most landlord-tenant disputes are in the county courts of Florida. And, I've been involved in this field now heavily since 2014. I'm a member of the County Court Committee for the Miami-Dade County Bar Association. I'm also a member of the Florida Bar Reptile, which is real property, probate, trust litigation. And there they have a landlord-tenant committee, or now it's called the leasing committee. I'm also a member there as well. So I'm definitely dealing with a lot of these issues in real estate from day to day. I've done a number of things from evicting people to suing landlords for security deposits. So I'm, well involved in this field.
Awesome. Thank you. So first off, let's get started. What's your opinion on the future of office real estate?
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, first, before I started, I wouldn't be a lawyer if I didn't have a little, just one or two disclaimers, just to be fair. So first, this is, whatever you tell me here is not, okay, one moment. Someone's telling me they tried to join. Just give me one moment. Okay. Okay, so it's there's no attorney-client privilege. Whatever you tell me here, you're not my client, and you're saying it out in the open. Whatever you tell me here is not okay, one moment. Someone's telling me that. Okay. Furthermore, whatever story or nugget I may tell you about a situation, don't assume that your situation is the same. And also, for more detailed analysis, you'd have to contact my law firm. My number is 786-453-7198, 786-453-7198. And my email is hlaurent, HLAURENT @LLOlegal.com. That's LLO as in Laurent Law Office, legal.com. Okay. All right.
All right. Yeah, so I was going to ask you, what's your opinion on the future of the office real estate? And we know you have a lot of clients that own buildings. What are they telling you? They're the ones on the ground right now. What are you hearing from them?
Well, I can tell you, I don't even have to go too far. I'm also a commercial tenant as well. I lease office space, and we are seeing that a lot more can be done at home than we previously thought. And it's gonna depend on what field you're in. One thing I think a lot of people have also seen is there's nothing like the office dynamic. We all seem to be much more productive in the office than at home. But I think there's definitely going to be a shift. And I can tell you in our field as lawyers, there's a big debate right now. Zoom has provided a lot of convenience for a lot of attorneys. However, there's a lot of attorneys that love the courtroom presence and to be there in front of a judge, particularly for very important decisions. And it just gives a more serious atmosphere being there, being in court. But then on the other hand, not having to drive through traffic, parking, going through security, waiting outside, this has provided also ample benefits. But I think society, things are going to change. But with respect to real estate in particular, there are going to be some changes. And, may it be that offices are now, maybe they rent to more than one person, and a person's entitled to a certain day rather than a certain space, so that change may come. And then also one thing I know for sure is going to change is those force majeure clauses. So basically a lot of leases have certain clauses that say if certain events take place that are acts of God or outside of just ordinary events, it may trigger maybe certain protections for the parties, certain out routes possibly. And, probably many of them didn't have, for example, a pandemic. What would happen if a pandemic, were to happen or were to occur? So I think now going forward with leases, a lot of people are going to give those clauses consideration.
Interesting. So do you feel that a lot of commercial leases won't be renewed, and there's just going to be a big shift to working from home?
I do think it's industry specific. I will say that I think that, just due to the economy on that alone, there's probably going to be less people renting as we go forward. Or if they are renting, maybe not renting at the same level that they were before. So I think I'm anticipating that shift. And, everybody has to be honest. We've all given it a thought. Well, couldn't we just run like this and that overhead? As a businessman, and you're a businessman, we all know the value of that overhead. You make more if you give less of it away. And so definitely, I think people are giving that consideration. But I think it's going to be more of a change in terms of how people contract and lease than it is people just not leasing at all. But I will say that I think in the technology sphere, there are going to be big changes. I think in that field in particular, because if you have your computer, you have internet, so how much space do you really need? And one thing I've also seen is people rotating. I'll come to the office on Monday, another person comes in on Tuesday. And so there's certain things. And then also, as I'm sure, as you've shown me, there are different ways to monitor employees online that people may take more advantage of, because of this.
Yeah, absolutely. Here, even in our office, we have 9 people. And at the moment, only 3 are coming to the office, and it's actually working out pretty well. So now I got a 1,600 square foot office, and now and it's about 70% empty. So definitely. So let me ask you another question. Today, if someone in South Florida, if they can't afford to pay their rent, they can't pay their rent. Do they have to?
Okay. Well, still trying to join, by the way. Share it. I'm still trying to share it on the page because people are texting me saying how do they get on? How do they see it? Okay, with respect to if you have to pay your rent. Now, as someone that's represented a lot of landlords, and as someone that also has represented a lot of tenants and wanted them to stay inside of their homes, the best thing you got to do is pay your rent. You're still under an obligation to pay your rent. Although I will say a lot of landlords have shown a lot of flexibility. So you should definitely, you've probably already had that conversation with your landlord. But legally speaking, even the governor's order, it says you're still under any obligation to pay rent. He's not really excusing it. The governor's order generally is more saying that maybe certain eviction actions can't take place. So that doesn't mean you don't have to pay rent. So you still should try to pay some amount of rent. I suggest just making some substantial portion or making certain arrangements with your landlord. Just have that conversation. It's not a friendly conversation, but you got to have it, and everybody is having it. And I think that's the best way to look at it, is that you do have an obligation to pay rent, but hopefully you would like to see for your landlord to work something out with you. But legally speaking, you do have to pay your rent.
Okay. And I want to just give a quick shout out to the people that are watching Hegel at the moment. You could probably then go ahead and share it. Just go to my site, and then you can just share it from there. So hello to Yoli, Carlos, Tanya, Daniel. Thank you guys for watching. If you have any questions, please put it, write a comment below, and at the end we will be taking some questions for Attorney Hegel to answer. So thank you for watching and sharing, and tag anybody that you know. If they own commercial real estate, if they're a tenant of an office, if they have a multifamily building or home that they rent, this is definitely a video that they're going to watch, and for someone that they're going to want to know with Attorney Hegel. So Hegel, you had mentioned about the law, and I believe it was the coronavirus relief bill that basically bans the evictions from properties that have a federal subsidy or federally backed mortgage through July the 25th. Can you just explain briefly what does that mean for both the tenant and the landlord regarding the corona relief bill?
Okay, so some protections that the federal government put in place here, and of course, since this law is so new, I mean, just right out of the plastic, there's a lot that we don't know in terms of how it's interpreted. Lawyers around the state are emailing each other constantly every day about the different provisions. But on a more general basis, it's saying that, certain people that have certain mortgages that were quote unquote backed by certain federal agencies or the federal government at some level, they can't, they're limited in terms of bringing eviction actions for a certain period of time. The best way I've said to handle it to landlords right now, is, okay, we can get into, don't get buried into too much of the specifics right now. Just, so two things. There's the technical legalese answer, which is the one I just gave you. But then there's the practical attorney-client good advice answer. So the technical legalese is, certain mortgages that are backed by the federal government, you're prohibited right now in terms of certain eviction removal actions that you can take. But the lawyer to client answer in terms of guidance, the better thing to do now is this. If you're, for example, in Dade County, and I believe the same is in Broward County, the sheriff can't remove anybody anyway. So that's the whole point of an eviction, is to remove someone. So if the sheriff, and the only person that can do it is the sheriff. So if the sheriff can't remove anyone, it doesn't matter what else that you can do. They don't have to leave until the sheriff comes. So as of right now, no, the sheriff's not removing anyone. I believe in Dade County, I'm not sure, but the date may be June 2nd. I know the governor's order is up to June 2nd, but the governor's order is going more at what you can file and certain notices. Your local sheriff, right now for Miami-Dade County, the mayor said the sheriff can't remove anyone from any property. So that's the thing, is there's like a cascading effect of different things that you need to line up to be able to remove someone from property. So right now, the best thing to look at is the sheriff's not removing anyone anyway. So seeing that the sheriff's not removing anyone anyway, however, of course, there's the other end of the story, is the faster you begin your eviction, right? The day when the sheriff does begin to remove everyone, you'll be in the line a lot faster. So there's that point of view of looking at it as well. But I think the first thing you should really try to do is to really try to work it out with your tenant. One, you don't want money coming out, you rather have money coming in. However, on the other hand, there are some people that they rely on their tenants for their income, solely, for some of our, particularly our older individuals out there. Also for Miami-Dade County, the chief judge of Dade County of our state courts, she has issued an administrative order that says basically you have to sign a certain specified affidavit that states that your mortgage does not fall within the federal, within the CARES Act provisions when you're filing for an eviction. So if you don't file that, if you don't sign that affidavit, your eviction's not going to go anywhere. Right. And so that affidavit is a bit detailed to ensure, to the best that we can right now, that your mortgage, that your property is, if it's still under a mortgage, what in terms of what you're able to do.
I see.
And,
all right. Yes, go ahead.
And lastly, I was going to say there's several layers here. There's the CARES Act. There's the executive order of the governor of Florida. There's the order of the Chief Justice of Florida, the Supreme Court, which he has said the clerk of courts cannot issue a writ of possession. A writ of possession is basically the order to the sheriff that you now have the legal power to go remove this person from the property. So if you don't get a writ of possession, the sheriff can't do what he needs to do. So that's from the Chief Justice of Florida. And then even if you get the writ of possession, if the mayor, for example, in Dade County, the mayor says the sheriff can't go remove anyone, there's nowhere for your writ to go. So these are the four different layers you have to be mindful of. And then I guess a fifth layer, which falls, somewhere between the Chief Justice and the Sheriff's Department is, and by the way, in Broward County, the sheriff is elected. In Dade County, the sheriff is appointed. So is that the chief judge of your county courts, they issue different administrative orders. And so they basically tell the judges certain actions or certain way for them to go about certain things. So they may impose certain limits or add additional layers, or requirements to what you have to do. So there's a cascading mountain here of different levels of different things. That's why I say it's best if you try to work it out privately. And guess what? If you work it out privately, you most likely won't have to pay a lawyer. Of course, the other end of it is if you make a bad deal or a bad settlement, then you need a lawyer even more now than you did before.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you so much for that information. I also see that we have some new people that joined. So Frank, hello. Agnes, hello. Thank you for joining us. We are live right now with Attorney Hegel Laurent from the Laurent Law Office, speaking about landlord-tenant issues and how they should be proceeding with the new normal. So we do have an audience question. It is, can a landlord stop service requests such as a roof repair, plumbing, electricity, even if they're not getting rent from the tenant? That's a great question. And if anybody else has any questions, please put it on the comments below and we'll definitely be asking.
Okay, the last thing you said was electricity, right? Out of all the different things?
Yes.
Okay, so Florida has a statute, Section 8367, that goes after the landlord taking certain actions to either remove the tenant or encourage the tenant to move from the property in ways that we really don't like. And so what the legislature did here, in probably the most tenant supportive part of the Florida statutes, is it says, for example, right, if your landlord cuts your electricity off today and you sued the landlord for cutting the electricity off, really, how much are your damages? If you lost some food, let's say, you lost $100 or $200 worth of food one day, let's say you cut it off for 2 days. Really, what are your damages? How much does it cost for you not watching TV for a day? So it would really be hard for you to it would not be worth it for you to sue your landlord under that situation, although we would all find it very offensive that your landlord just turned the electricity off on you. So the legislature said they came up with a formula. How about this? The landlord cuts off the electricity, 3 months rent. That's something we know is going to hurt. 3 months rent automatic, plus attorney's fees and costs. So you could tell a lawyer was behind this. So I've sued landlords for this, and it is not fun. It is very, very painful, and it's for each violation.
Wow.
So the thing is, because of that, when it comes to terminating a utility, I always tell landlords, this is a very dangerous area. Try to stay away from it. Now that's terminating or interrupting a utility. So, you play with the power box outside, but you didn't cut off the electricity. I had that situation. That's not a good one. And so remember that terminating or interrupting with the utilities. So you want to stay away from those things. Now, with regards to certain services, obviously with COVID-19, the landlord here has to be sure you're following certain the guidelines, and the people that work for you as well are following the guidelines from the county, the CDC, and the State Department of Health with regards to maintenance coming in. I think what you should probably do that I've seen done is contact the tenant, ask them certain questions, really that are COVID related, and of course ensure the same of the people working for you or the contractors as well. And I would say this: look, you kind of generally now probably be best to scale down. And however, when it comes to essential services, truly essential services, you should definitely do your best to maintain those. And for certain other things, remain in communication with your tenant. This may be a chance you may want to tell the tenant, look, if you want to repair it, and then maybe and then I can give you a deduction off of your rent for this one time only transaction. That may be something you want to consider, because I can tell you from representing tenants, whenever they're going to get a credit from the lease, all of a sudden they're a lot more active, they're a lot more creative when they're going to get a discount from the lease. So that may be a thing. You put the ball in their hands in that scenario. But I would say that, yes, maybe some of the more luxe services you provide, maybe you may have to do a certain scale back. But the key thing I keep reinforcing is communication, communication, communication.
Yeah.
And also with respect to utilities, stay away from that. Stay away. Just like a live wire of electricity, you want to stay away from terminating or interrupting with the electricity, water services, a lot of different things. So.
Awesome. Yes, thank you. So, as a landlord, what if someone got a request for rent deferral or rent reduction? So if they got that request from their tenant about a rent deferral or reduction, how should they respond? And can you also just explain what the difference is between those two?
Okay. You said a rent reduction and a rent?
Deferral.
Oh, deferral. Okay. I'm going to assume generally a rent reduction is to say if your rent is $1,000 this month, maybe you pay $750, $500. A rent deferral is to say if your rent is $1,000 this month, maybe you pay $750 now, $750 next month, and then down the line, the $250 outstanding for each month, we'll make arrangements for you to make that payment down the line. I think this is definitely in the spirit of the conversation, of what I've been saying in terms of trying to work with your tenant. And the other thing is, I tell landlords sometimes when you try to work with your tenant, instead of getting zero, right? Because you have to remember, even if you sue them, remember you pay a lawyer, you pay filing fees, you evict them, you got to pay the sheriff, you got to pay the clerk of courts. You may never get that money back. So, once again, making arrangements with your tenant to pay you some rent is money coming in. Suing your tenant for eviction to remove them, money coming out. So I think if you do that, you have to have it in writing, you have to have it agreed to, and to the extent possible, you have to have it signed. And also, of course, always try to relate it back to the terms of your lease. That's also very, very important. I've had scenarios where people made modifications, but they didn't link those modifications back to the lease. So if your tenant is late in making the deferred payment, and then you try to charge late fees, you may get some slick creative lawyer like myself that'll say, well, the lease said, late fees, for these payments. But here you said that this payment's outside of the lease. This is a one-time only transaction. There's no late fee for it. Sorry. So you got to watch out when you're linking things outside of the lease, particularly if you paid a lawyer, nice sum of change to create the lease. And then you say, well, I want to save I don't want to go to a lawyer. I just want to do this on the fly. And then now, so I would say try generally link it back to the lease, or on the landlord side, if you can make an informal arrangement, depending on your situation, of course. If you have, more than 10, you have 10, 15 tenants, it's always better to get a lawyer. If you have maybe one or two tenants and you have a long positive relationship with them, maybe this may be a bit more informal. Once again, I'm not advising that, as a lawyer. This is more from the business side of things, because, obviously a lawyer, we've got to charge for our time, but then the amount of money that your tenant's paying you, and then now you want you're giving them a reduction, a deferral. I mean, as a lawyer, I'd give you I'd give you a reduction too than I would normally charge. But you've got to, you got to keep all these different things in balance. That's why the best thing to do is to work it out. But be mindful of the relationship you have with your tenant, the number of tenants, and what kind of lease you have. With a commercial lease, they're usually so landlord lopsided anyway, that, it says, the tenant's giving everything but their firstborn on there. So if you can give them some flexibility, I think it would be a great thing during these times, and it would be a great money saver. And yet again, it's another opportunity for money to come in.
Wow, thank you. Wow, that was and this is why you need to make sure that from the beginning you have a lease, and then you have a professional such as yourself there for you. So we have actually another question from the audience, and I haven't actually thought of this before. So the question is, does a tenant have to tell their landlord, so I guess this is on the residential side, if they're working at home full time? So like you have a lot of businesses, they're allowing their employees to work from home. And then I would even put it to this extent: what if the owner decided, you know what, we're going to close the office, we're going to have everybody work from home. Like I know when I used to work from home, there was the city, you had to have like the occupational license or something that you had to have code enforcement come in. So what happens then, now that you have more people working from home? Do you have to tell your landlord, and do you have to tell your local city that you're operating like a business inside that home?
Okay. Well, if you can only specify who has to tell which landlord. Does the commercial tenant who's not having his employees come into the office have to tell his landlord, or
No,
does the residential tenant who's now working from home has to tell, their landlord?
no, they're referring to residential. So
Okay.
yeah.
On the residential side, of course, the first thing is, what is working at home for you, right? What are you doing for work, working from home? That's something that's very important. If you're fixing electronic equipment, obviously, and even doing certain things on the internet, there's different frequencies between, in a lot of places, depending on whether you're residential or commercial. So you have to be mindful of that, just on a safety note. And also, for a lot of people that have children running around, you may not want to expose them to certain things that you do for work, maybe certain conversations or certain activities, so now with respect to your landlord, I think, here it's a little more complicated, because now you're bringing in the administrative side, as in, your local municipal regulations for your county and your city. They usually have those. So where, depending on if you're working from home, as you stated, you have to get certain licensing and certain permits for that. This is really on a more very personal question with regards to what your particular situation is. Are you renting a home? Are you renting in a building? And what kind of work are you doing? I mean, does your work just simply entail of you answering phone calls, responding to emails, So I think this is something where really you'd have to see what your local municipality has in terms of occupancy. But right now, I can tell you the enforcement level of that is not at its peak, suffice it to say, because everyone has to stay from everyone. Well, I know we've moved and we're trending away from everyone staying home, but for a good amount of time, everyone has had to stay home. So that question is a lot more difficult, to understand, to answer. And sometimes, look, as an attorney, I'm not afraid to jump on that lifeboat and say, I don't know entirely, but obviously, if you contact our office with respect to a specific situation, our number is 786-453-7198, 786-453-7198. And we do charge consultation fees, so I'm not blindsiding you. Maybe we could be able to address that on a more personal level. But once again, as I said, the enforcement, of this is not at its peak right now. Although that doesn't mean that you shouldn't have to do your best to follow your local municipal regulations and also your lease requirements, because a lot of the leases, they do have certain limitations in terms of if you're running a business, because it's strictly for residential purposes. But once again, some of these things may be hard to enforce. I mean, is your landlord going to come in and listen to who you're talking, for how long, etc. Once again, the level of enforcement does not mean that it's not a provision that you have to abide by, but it's something, that you should be mindful of.
Awesome, awesome. Well, thank you so much, Hegel, for this session. I know you gave your phone number out. What about your website? How can they look you up online?
Okay, the website is www.llolegal.com, www.llolegal.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Hegel, and thank you for our audience of Miami business leaders for watching. If you know anybody, again, that is a owner of a building, multifamily, residential, tag them on this video, share this video, send them the link, invite them to the group. And also, if you are an attorney and you are part of the Miami Business Group leaders and you want to, maybe you have a topical, something that's interesting that you want to talk about that you think that's going to benefit this group, that is the purpose of the Miami Business Leaders Group, is to help each other, and hopefully one day we'll be able to see each other and network, etc. So thank you so much. And also invite your law friends to this group. We have a lot of attorneys in this group. So Hegel, once more, thank you so much. You gave us so much valuable information. Thank you, audience, for listening in, and we'll see you next time.
All right, thank you. Take care.
All right, bye-bye.